MG Rod back with you, and we're going to be doing a little update on the 60 MGA. I was hoping for a little bit bigger of an update, but an old army buddy of mine came into town with this, and while he was in town, he wanted me to change the oil, check out a couple things, including what he thought was an exhaust rattle. Check out my short that I just put up on Friday to see what it really was. But let's just say in this video, I'm surprised he made it all the way here without any issues. So I ended up spending a whole day just going around car shopping for him so he could go back home safely. You know, some people would say they circled the problem. Yep. So we did get the door top rails covered and put on the car. Now when you're doing these top rails, one thing I forgot to mention in the last video is when you're fitting these things and getting them the length right, you need to account for that thickness of all this material, like what I was talking about where how this doesn't fit right because of that thickness. Because as this gets thicker, it pushes the rail back and gives you less options for how it fits. I would say you'd probably be better off to overcompensate for more thickness than really is there than to undercompensate. I actually undercompensated on this a little bit, making it a little tight to get things adjusted. If it's a hair on the short side, then it gives you more room to twist and pull this to try to get it lining up a little better to this, which is always a bit of a difficult situation anyway. Because unless you do all this fitting during the bodywork stages, it's really hard to get all this to line up perfectly like you want it to. Because these things were largely hand built. You know, fenders, doors, they don't even necessarily fit the best from car to car to car. And I have no idea on this car if any of this sheet metal might have come from another car or is all original. Plus, I didn't do the rockers on this car. So when we got this lined up here, when I did the body work, and I got this lined up here and got the door gaps as even as possible, but you can see the door never lined up to the cowl here. The only way to make the door line up to the cowl is to slide the whole door back some, which means you got to slide the fender back, and then it doesn't line up to the rockers properly. So this was all happy medium, and I hope this fits as good as we can get it to fit during the final fitment. So, you know, you pick your poison as to what you want to be off a little bit. So I am starting to glue the carpet onto the battery cover, but the next issue we have is these corner pieces for the rear rail. What I had here was a brand new one that was for the right side, and then we had an original one for the left side, or this was left side, this was right side. But when I got this one out, I noticed that the screw holes were really far forward, but here's the one for the other side. The original holes on this one were actually here, and then at some point those were broken off and they put them back here. So we don't want that kind of a difference. These holes are also in a different place, a little bit. I think this was 7/16 difference, and on this side, on the inside pieces, these are like a 1/4 inch difference. So I actually ended up uncovering another left piece, and the screw holes are in completely different places on this one, so none of these three actually match up to each other. So I was trying to figure out, well, how do I want to do this? Because this car is getting sold. There is a top with it, and I want to make sure that these actually fit to the top, but also not put them in the wrong place so that when the new owner, if they decide to put a new top on it, because that's nowhere near a brand new top, that they're not going to have any more issues. So I just said, well, let me think about this for a bit, and I stuck it aside for a minute. So I decided to keep something moving. I went ahead and put in the spare tire cover since we're putting one in this. Now, the holes around here were not all the same size. Sometime in the past when they've been drilled out, they were wallered out a little bit on a couple of the holes. So I couldn't really put the original rivets in it and have them all hold without putting washers on the back side here, because the rivets are supposed to go through from the trunk through the back panel here. So I think a good alternative here is number 10 screws. So what I did was I put the number 10 screws and run them through that way, put the heads out here so it all looks kind of neat and tidy with the nuts on the nuts and washers on the back side. And in this case I used 1032 by halves. You could use 1032 or 1024, whatever you have on hand. So we don't actually have the spare tire in it yet. We're not 100% sure what's going to happen spare tire wise, because what he had for a spare that he had cleaned up and painted was actually an early B wheel, and he didn't realize it until I told him that it wasn't for an A, and he wanted to put an A wheel back in it, but he didn't have one, and he didn't have a tire. So my guess is we're probably going to end up putting the B wheel and tire back in here as a spare. Even though it's not the correct wheel, it'll still work. So at least it has a spare when it gets sold to the new owner. So I finished covering the battery cover here. I'm probably going to have to play with the Zeus fittings underneath here, because I think that one there is bent a little bit. It's not uncommon for people to be pushing too hard on these where the wire's not lined up, and then they just push the wire down and then they don't want to hook anymore. So we got that done, and now I'm ready. I can start putting in the door pocket on this side. I already got the one on that side in, but and then I got to modify the bar a little bit, because the new door panels are actually thicker than the originals, and those bars, even though they're new, are made to fit the thickness of the original door panels, not the replacements. So yeah, aftermarket parts. But probably in the next video, we'll get into starting to work on covering these rails here. While not only are these the hardest pieces of carpet to install, I think, but they're also probably the worst cut pieces and the worst fitting ones in the whole kit. Now, I'm not sure if the carpet kit that he bought for this was a Moss kit or not. It just came to me in a bag, so I don't know where he bought it from. But yeah, it does not fit at all up here and to this area here at all. So I've been avoiding that until now, but now I've got to do it. So, and once we get that in, then we can swap the seat frames around, make them correct, and look at getting them bolted in and finishing up the rest of the carpet.